Hey everyone, and welcome to another Kano Reviews. Today we take a look at Call of Duty WW2. I did a lot of World War II shooters over the past few weeks and still have quite a few to review on the channel, but I wanted to make sure that I get to this one since this game is quite interesting when it comes to what they are trying to do with it. One has to realize that this game got released after Call of Duty had suffered a series of terrible to mediocre entries like Infinite Warfare, Ghosts, Black Ops 3, etc. The Call of Duty franchise definitely did not impress that much anymore like it used to, and in a way it lost a face and identity with how convoluted it became. Rather than an epic large-scale shooter where you take part in huge battles amongst dozens of troops, it became more about wall jumping and taking on assignments with only a squad of 3 or 4. I personally really dislike this approach, as I firmly believe that the power and origin of Call of Duty lies at these large-scale battles where you feel like a simple soldier amongst so many of your own men who desperately try to stay alive and overcome incredible odds. Call of Duty World War II promised to go back to those roots, in more so than one. Not only did it promise to go back to the World War II setting, the same setting where the Call of Duty franchise started, but it would also go back to the formula, where you took part in giant battles involving a large amount of NPCs on both sides. The story of the campaign would tell of Red Daniels, who is part of the Big Red One and takes part in the liberation of Europe from the landings of Normandy onward. In Call of Duty 2 Big Red One, you play basically as the same guys, and therefore there is some overlap with the campaign and battles if you've played that before. Not that that's a bad thing though. But it should be said that in the game Call of Duty 2 Big Red One, they took the effort to also show you the battles in North Africa and Italy, and they refrained from that here. A missed opportunity. I do love how one of your buddies is a veteran who was in Africa, so that is a nice nod to the fact that the Big Red One was indeed already active then. So despite Call of Duty World War II going back to its roots with the setting, it does try to create a more story-driven narrative that, in all honesty, is very hit and miss when it comes to its execution. It has some likable and well thought out characters, but also forcibly has social justice checkmarks and also forced drama that doesn't really go anywhere or adds anything. Let's first begin with the positive. You spend a large amount of time with 3 close friends of yours, which are all created quite well. You have Aiello, the bad boy veteran, Styles, the nerdy photographer, and Zussman, the cheeky clown of the bunch. Though they might be archetypes, they never really feel too cliché. Aiello and Styles are the least developed, and Zussman has quite a bit more depth, which does get appreciated. But they do something with him in the end that feels very weird and out of place for what the rest of the campaign is about. But we will get to that later. The other likable character in the story is your commanding officer Turner. He is strict but fair, and cares deeply about his men, but isn't afraid to throw away his humanity in a war situation and refrain from helping innocents who are in need. Whether that is the correct way to do things, since some might say that the mission has priority, is up for debate, but I like to think that those serving still have a sense of morale, and they are there to help the population when they can, not only there to kill people. With Turner, you can see that he cares deeply for the men he has under his command. He motivates them to press on during various battles, and is often a visible participant amongst the action. Overall, a very well written and acted out character, and honestly, I wish the game had more missions involving him. However, there's one particular character that is written incredibly bad, and he's unfortunately with you all the way to the end, and that is Pearson, Turner's second in command. This guy, whose actor I believe I recognize from the first Transformers movie, is an absolute douchebag to you and your friends from the first moment you meet him. He makes snarky and rude comments to his men, even harasses them when they talk to a German captive, or finding out that one of your friends speaks German, and also assaults some of his men physically. Sometimes in games or movies, you have characters that are written like real douchebags, and you wait for that twist to come where you find out that in reality, the guy's actually really nice or a good guy. But that never happens with Pearson, even though the game clearly tries to at one point. They keep talking about an Operation Kasserine Pass in North Africa where Pearson was responsible for the death of many of his men. It almost becomes a myth of how much he doesn't care about his own guys, and seeing how he interacts with characters like you or Zussman, you would indeed agree with that statement. At a certain point, Turner sacrifices himself, which is unfortunate because if they had Pearson do that, it could feel more like a redemption, but alas. After Turner has died and Pearson takes command, he still is written as a terrible and really unkind person. Then finally, there's the twist that the reason why so many people died under Pearson during Kasserine Pass is that he went behind enemy lines to rescue some of his men that were cut off. In order to save the men he cared about, he got more of his own men killed. But despite you learning this, by the end, I still thought Pearson was an absolute douche that had not redeemed himself in the slightest, and he was just overall a really unlikable character that brings forced drama that the game doesn't need. Pearson and Turner often don't see eye to eye, and this plays an essential part in the story, which feels very melodramatic and out of place for a World War II story. What's more is that it's possible to make a character that is quite cold or harsh in personality, but you still like them or they are properly written as a fleshed out character. Aiello, for example, has quite the hatred for the Germans that he's fighting, and even is quite repulsed when he finds out that his buddy Zussman is half German. An interesting case, since that discriminatory thinking is of course a very morale point that comes to light in any war situation or story. But Aiello is written in such a way that he would never leave his buddy Zussman's side, and even though he seems annoyed about helping German civilians, even making some snarky remarks about how you cannot save everybody, you can see in his dialogue and delivery that he knows deep down that he too cannot leave those people to their fate. But Pearson has none of those redeeming qualities, and is just a prick. He insults Zussman when he finds out he's part German, he even shoves him when he wants to give some water to a prisoner of war. He just is a real big prick to everyone and his men, and I ended up really not caring about his character and making the story a little less enjoyable. If Pearson actually would do something that would redeem himself, it would be better, but that simply is not the case. The other issue with the story is that in the final 2 levels, suddenly a subplot gets introduced, which on paper is interesting and valid for the setting, but in practice it goes nowhere and doesn't add anything. Zussman is Jewish, and gets captured by German soldiers at one point and is being deported to a labor camp. Here, a German commander is looking for Jews amongst the American soldiers, and the threat of them finding out about Zussman becomes the implicated tone. Now again, having a story about a Jewish POW sent to a labor camp, or worse yet, a concentration camp, is a valid story to tell. But not only during the last mission, it feels so ham-fisted and last minute to where it seems like the creator said, "Oh yeah, we also have to make a remark about the suffering about the Jews during World War II. That doesn't really get brought up to the foreground in a lot of video games. Let's have this happen to Zussman. But there's no time. Well, let's just let that happen to him during the cutscene before the last mission, and then after that mission, we already rescue him." The intent might have been good by the creators, but the execution is very sloppy and hastily done. And that goes the same for the social justice checkmarks that this game has. The single-player campaign makes sure that you get to play or interact with various races and sexes to present the representation here. But instead of it feeling like a true-to-life representation, it feels like the earlier mentioned checkmarks. The tank driver of one of the tanks you get to control is Hispanic, much like the driver from the movie Fury. Then in the final 3 levels they make sure to implement a black soldier as an engineer to have that representation, and also there's the mission where you play as the female resistance fighter. Now mind you, I'm not saying that those parts of the mission are bad. I actually really like the female resistance fighter mission. But what I'm trying to say is that it all feels very ham-fisted and merely for the female representation to be over and done with. For example, you play as that female resistance fighter, but then afterwards, she is never mentioned again or you never get to play as her again. She was just there to have that representation checkmark checked and be done with it. Same goes for the black soldiers, where towards the end of the war, more and more black soldiers were sent off to the front, also including Japanese American soldiers who were finally allowed to fight. But that's not presented in this way, and instead it's just, we need to make sure there's a black guy in here, so there you go, you have a black NPC. So the story is very much hit or miss, and in all honesty, I prefer my Call of Duty or World War II shooter stories way more straight to the point, like the earlier Call of Duty games or Brothers in Arms 1 and 2. But what about the gameplay and the missions themselves? Well, it's again unfortunately a bit hit and miss. Let me just say that the game first of all looks absolutely amazing. Even now, this 3-year-old game still looks absolutely stunning with gorgeous lighting, animations, textures, and overall looks. Characters' facial animations are really well done, and I sometimes just stood still and took all the scenery or epicness in of the spectacle that was on display. When it comes to looks, D-Day and Normandy have never looked this good in any other World War II shooter. The beach is just littered with bodies, anti-tank obstacles, armor wrecks, and explosions going off everywhere. It's one hell of a sight to behold. The following battles in the trenches are also pretty cool, though I wish that section on the beach lasted longer. Medal of Honor Frontline and European Assault did this a lot better by having you spend a good 5 to 10 minutes or so on the beach, whereas here, you basically are off the beach after 2 minutes. There was, however, one thing I noticed very early on, and this kinda continues throughout the entire game, and that is that the sound design is simply pretty bad. When you are on the boat and on the beach, I quickly noticed how unimpressive the sounds were, with often bullet impacts and machine gun noise completely missing. It might have been to make the audio of the dialogue better to hear by removing some sounds, but it ends up feeling really underwhelming. I'm not kidding in that Medal of Honor Frontline, a 15-year-older game, has way better sound design with way more impact. The sounds you hear in Call of Duty World War II simply do not coincide with what is happening on screen. You hear some muffled explosions and maybe the taps of bullet impacts, but many other sounds are omitted. You can even often see sparks of bullet impacts that have no sound accompanied with it. You can see machine gun tracers zipping through landscapes without any proper sound, and it just brings you out of the moment. And this also is the case for other levels where the sound simply is not that epic and on the same levels as the visuals. Battlefield 5 is a very flawed game when it comes to its campaign, and Call of Duty World War II is much better in that regard. But Battlefield definitely beats it when it comes to the sound delivery. To make my point, I will show a little bit from the game with its sound, and then afterwards replace it with the sound of either Call of Duty Frontline or Call of Duty 2, and just hear how much of a difference it makes.
Hurry before they reload! Move it! Private Daniels, get to the seawall! Daniels, this way! Hurry!
So I hope that cleared some things up, and though it might seem that sound design isn't that important overall to a game, it becomes very apparent how important it is for the experience when it's not done very well. But let's get back to some positive points. At least what I love about the campaign of Call of Duty World War II is that you are once again fighting alongside a lot of troops in most missions. The levels in Normandy are very cool and epic, and offer a good variety, with one level having you fight alongside tanks as you go from farm to farm, while another has you fight through a French city from building to building. There are some unique elements that they added in this game that never really surpass the rank of gimmick, but they are still pretty neat nonetheless. One of those elements is that your various squad mates can give you items with the press of a button. Instead of regenerating health, this game harkens back to the old school health bar, and whenever you want to heal, you need to use a medkit. Zussman is the teammate with the medkits, so you need to look for him to get restocked on medkits. Another teammate then has ammo for you, another one has grenades, and another has mortar support. It actually is pretty cool since it gives you some more meaning to your teammates and buddies, since you sometimes need to find the specific ones if you run low on ammo or health. What's more is that in each level, you have some heroic moments, which are these short moments where random American soldiers get wounded or are fighting a German soldier. You then have a few seconds to drag them to safety or kill the enemy soldier, and it simulates even more that many other NPCs are fighting alongside you. Completing these heroic moments doesn't really earn you anything great, but the fact that you can do this is still appreciated. There are also some moments where you can capture German prisoners as they surrender, and order them to get to the ground. Or you could not do that, and this choice that is offered is also a nice addition. So the first few Normandy missions are very cool and epic, and are great. But there are unfortunately also some levels that fall a bit flat and that are not that great. The first of these is the partly stealth mission where you need to stop an armored train. The stealth mechanics in this game aren't great, and honestly reminded me of those crappy Battlefield campaigns where you have to stealth through a camp, whereas the whole premise of the game is large epic warfare. The same counts for here. There are, I think, 3 or 4 sections throughout the campaign where you need to sneak through an area, and these parts are simply not very fun or too engaging. But the train level simply lets go of those epic skill battles and instead still tries to deliver on something epic by having a train chase sequence that ends up being absolutely ridiculous and really unrealistic, with your car being intercepted and dragged on the rails by a train, and then the train exploding and rolling all over the place like it's a dinky toy. It's so over the top that it really took me out of the situation and really wasn't necessary in any way in this game. After that comes the earlier mentioned female resistance fighter mission, where you need to infiltrate a German headquarters in Paris in a hotel, and this mission is really fun and atmospheric. It almost plays like a World War II hitman game, where you need to search for a specific target by talking to several officers and remembering certain traits about this made-up German persona of yours. There's a lot to see in this hotel, and though there isn't much action, it's just all very atmospheric, and it's absolutely fantastic. Halfway through, you unfortunately get another stealth section, but I just ran right through that, and the mission ends up with a pretty cool battle in the streets of Paris alongside resistance fighters, finally giving you another large-scale battle to witness. It should also be said that many of these missions are of a pretty solid length and feel quite meaty. It's not uncommon for a mission to last 30 or so minutes, which is a lot better than the short 10-minute ones in other Call of Duties. It does end up that this game only has very few levels overall. There's also a short tank section at one point where you control a Sherman as you take on several German panzers and anti-tank infantry. But the tank section in pretty much all earlier Call of Duty games were way better. They clearly tried to imitate the movie Fury a bit with this part in the game, since the shells are ricocheting off the armor like crazy. But since you are fighting in the narrow streets of a city, there isn't much room to move. The tank levels in Call of Duty 1, 2, and also games like World at War offer way more open levels where you have a lot of room to move, flank, and approach the enemy from different angles. That is not the case with Call of Duty World War II, as you are just making really tight corners around buildings in the narrow streets. The battles that you have on foot in this area are still very cool though, and also feel large scale and epic. There's a section where you have to sneak out with a young German girl in your hand, which again is not that fun since it's stealth, but the overall story bit that it presents is pretty interesting, with a civilian truck getting attacked and someone getting killed because the young girl stayed back and hid by herself. Then finally, after all that, the coolest mission in the game gets presented. It's pretty rare for a game to have some of the coolest levels and set pieces being delivered after more than half of the game, but Call of Duty World War II does exactly that. The Herdgun Forest levels are by far the best in the game. First off, it starts with something different, and that is that you are ordered to deliver food to a particular soldier on the lookout, and while you are doing this, you are free to roam around the American base camp and take in all the cool atmosphere. And there is so much to see and hear. Various groups of soldiers are cracking jokes or telling stories of back home. There are soldiers cleaning their rifle, sharing a smoke, shaving themselves, or writing in a notebook. Having these moments where you just walk around and can witness the atmosphere of the everyday World War II soldier really brings that proper Band of Brothers feeling to the forefront. Band of Brothers is still, in my opinion, by far the best series ever made, and I love everything about it. Not just the epic battles, but also the moments between all the soldiers where they just sit in their foxholes and talk. It's great, and with these short moments of no action but pure atmosphere, Call of Duty World War II delivers on something unique and something I would have loved to see more of in the game. But what's cool too is that once that moment is over and the action starts, it's still incredibly epic, with just so many troops on your side attacking and fending off an incoming German counterattack. Artillery barrages that tear the forest and your men to shreds make for such amazing scenes that I could not help but still be amazed at how awesome it felt. It should also be worth noting that the Herdgun Forest itself looks so incredibly pretty in this game, with lush vegetation and ground clutter as the sun rays shine through the leaves of the trees. Beautiful tall mountains on the horizon are the cherry on top for the prettiest levels this already pretty game has to offer. Then afterward you have the Battle of the Bulge, a theater of war I really find cool. And the game gives you another section where it's pure atmosphere as you walk along the front with all the foxholes and get to see how your fellow soldiers are doing. It's again so awesome and made me relive that Band of Brothers feeling once more, really emphasizing how cool it is if World War II games have these small sections in their games. The battle itself here is also quite spectacular, with the artillery barrages unrooting trees and the snow being flown everywhere, making it look very awesome. The battle is a bit similar to that of the Bulge level from Call of Duty United Offensive, where you are in the foxholes and need to fend off a German counterattack as you wait for the air cavalry. In this level, there's also a section where you get to fly as a fighter plane, and though it looks pretty cool with lots of planes on screen at once, the gameplay is very forgettable to the point where I thought, why even put this in the game? It would have been more fun if you had this as a turret section like a United Offensive rather than have you control this plane and barely get to do anything with it. The level after this is another pretty disappointing one, with a large stealth section and a mission that doesn't look all that appealing since you are fighting in the dark mostly. The level itself is pretty well set up though, being quite wide and giving you the opportunity to fight indoors or outside between the tiny barracks. The last level is pretty cool again, with a fight on the bridge over the Rhine as you liberate several towers. And then the game is over, and though there are still some subplots involving your pregnant girl back home and the brother you look up to, yada 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 yada, it just all feels a bit empty by the end, except for some cool missions here and there that you got to experience. Call of Duty World War II is by far not the worst Call of Duty experience there is, and there are far worse entries in the series. But it's also by far not the best, and I can tell you that I prefer games like Call of Duty 1, United Offensive, Call of Duty 2, Modern Warfare 1 and 2, Black Ops, and World at War all over this game. Call of Duty World War II in the end gets stuck somewhere in the middle. I can still definitely recommend it though. There are moments of brilliance and awesome set pieces that are worth experiencing, like the Hurtgen Forest levels. But I probably would only recommend this after one is done with several other Call of Duty games first. In the end, Call of Duty World War II gets a 7.7. It's slightly better than your average Call of Duty campaign, but it sometimes tries a bit too hard to mark all the check marks and thereby delivering a cluttered, convoluted product that fails to miss the bullseye on multiple accounts while still delivering various missions where you feel that you are taking part in a larger conflict or battle with a great experience as a result. There are a lot of other Call of Duty games I still need to review on the channel, and I'm slowly running out of good ones. There will be some day where I have to tackle some of the lesser ones and see how they stack up against games like this one.